Chicago is a proud city with tremendous resources and a long history of improving the health, safety, and vitality for our residents. Our vision for a trauma-informed city is one in which all Chicagoans have the support to thrive regardless of challenges they face. Achieving this vision is personally important to me. Toward that end, we must invest our shared knowledge and practices wherever possible. Working together with our city agencies, community-based organizations, civic, faith, and community leaders, we can raise the bar of how we respond to trauma that impacts our residents every day.
This video serves as the basis for us to prevent trauma from occurring in the first place. It will serve as an introductory accompaniment to your current or soon-to-be in-depth training. Our goal for today is to engage you as city residents, leaders, partners, to help Chicago in becoming a trauma-informed city.
To be trauma-informed is to really understand an approach that helps to take into the consideration a person and all that they bring to the table, including their experiences that may be traumatic in nature, and also understanding that the way they show up in a space may also be driven by the ways in which they're coping with those traumas. Our goal is to ensure that we're understanding, responding appropriately, and with the most compassion that we can.
Throughout this webinar, you'll hear the following key terms and definitions. Trauma. Adverse childhood experiences. Resilience. Trauma-informed. Collective care. A trauma-informed approach includes the 4 R's, realizes the impact of trauma and understands pathways for recovery, responds by integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices, recognizes signs and symptoms of trauma of everyone involved, resists re-traumatization by preventing trauma and strengthening our protective factors.
We like to think of trauma as having 3 components. The first is an event. It's something really scary that's happened to a person in their lifetime that can actually induce the feeling that they might die or that someone they really care about might die or is really in danger. The second is the experience of that person. So this is where we might have differences. 2 people can experience the same event and yet have different experiences of that depending on how close they are to the person, how far away physically, whether or not how old they are. All of those things can impact how you make sense out of this experience that you've had. And then the third is really what we think of as the effects, which is for an individual, how that event and that trauma impacts them moving forward. Are they able to move past it, or is it something that really continues to impact them, not just in the immediate first couple of weeks or months, but really continues and starts to impact maybe their sense of the world and whether the world is a safe place.
In order to highlight the great disparity in Chicago with mental health resources, we talked about an equation, and so that's 85x divided by 69y equals 8 times 7. So the 85 represents the life expectancy of the Loop, which is downtown Chicago, and the 69 is the life expectancy of Washington Park. The 8 is the number of miles between the 2 places, and 7 is the number of train stops on the L between the 2. And so this is such a big deal because the Loop and the south side of Chicago are not that far apart. And I've grown up on the south side. It's nothing more than a 20-30 minute drive. So it's pretty staggering to see that there's such a difference between how long someone is going to live. We don't necessarily ask people in the moment how they can solve this, but it's a way to kind of bring light to that issue and show them, hey, like, this is a problem, and this is something that we can find many solutions for, and something that we can try to change.
Adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, are experiences that occur in a person's life before the age of 18. They have prolonged and lasting impacts. These life situations can include incarceration, childhood neglect, community violence, and historical aspects. The Adverse Childhood Experiences study demonstrated the more adversity in your childhood, the higher your score, and the higher your risk for health problems later in life. A total score of 4 or more ACEs may reduce one's life by 20 years. Working together, we can help create neighborhoods, communities, and a world in which every person can thrive despite these factors.
The library offers a very robust series of programs and services over the summertime for youth from birth through teen. The Summer Learning Challenge is a nationally recognized evidence-based approach to stopping summer slide and accelerating school growth through fun, hands-on activities, reading, which is of course our backbone, and STEM and STEAM experiences for kids of all ages and families too. Focusing on resilience and grit and persistence has shown us that we're seeing kids who are better prepared for school, who, according to surveys, feel more confident in their learning and more confident in STEM and STEAM, and are better prepared for the challenges of work and life in the 21st century.
We have two responses to a stressful or dangerous situation. So we may fight it, which means we may stay and go against that force that is making us feel endangered, or we might flight, which is running away from that danger or that stressful event. And so when this happens, we release two hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. A super common experience is when we think we lose our phones. So you reach into your pocket and you don't feel your phone. And in that moment, you feel more like you have heavy breathing, you might start sweating, you feel very nervous. But when you reach in your pocket further and you feel your phone, all of that starts to go away. So your breathing slows, you may stop sweating, you feel more at ease. And so this is your body releasing that adrenaline and cortisol to tell you that this event might be dangerous and then taking it back. And so when you're exposed to this in a very typical way, it's okay, it's healthy, it's normal. But the issues arise when we deal with that chronically. So when we have chronic stress and trauma. And so when this happens, you lose that fourth step of balance, of coming back to normal, of your adrenaline and cortisol levels returning to base.
Our bodies are designed to assist us in surviving. We automatically go into adaptive responses known as fight, flight, and freeze. In fight, people struggle to regain or hold on to power, especially when feeling coerced. We may label people as non-compliant or combative. Flight is the compulsion to flee from a perceived life-threatening danger. People may disengage or run away and check out emotionally. Such actions are sometimes misinterpreted as uncooperative or resistant. Freeze. The possum response, known as freeze, is our response to perceived life-threatening situations. The person may describe feeling out of their body, they are unable to speak, or they seem distant. People are often mislabeled as passive or unmotivated. As previously noted, stress and trauma can be carried throughout life, but remember the brain is flexible and adaptable, and we can recover from difficult experiences. This is known as resilience.
Resilience is a concept that I think is most easily sort of recognized as the ability of someone to bounce back after an experience. So we might think of resilience as something a person has been through a really terrible loss or been through an event that was very, very scary and kind of set them off course, but they were able to move through that process and continue on with their life and be successful.
Resilience means being able to keep a positive mindset throughout all the surroundings, like even if there's bad things going on. Just try to find positive habits. Don't try to fall into the system. Just try to be the best you can be, no matter the situation.
Resilience is seen along a continuum. It is not a singular moment in time. Instead, it moves across our lifespan, and much like stress, it fluctuates depending on our subjective experience. Because toxic stress and adversity may change the trajectory of people's lives, for many, resilience really means creating a new normal. Let's discuss shifting our perspective. A supportive, centered approach to addressing trauma requires a different question that moves from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Using this language, we remove blame, assumptions, avoid re-traumatization, and work to prevent stress from happening in the first place. A trauma-informed approach recognizes that all persons possess strengths as survivors, have demonstrated courage and resiliency. Individuals' assets must be utilized in a supportive, strength-building process. Essentially, it's about working with an understanding of who the person is, what they are coping with, where they are coming from, and what helps them to heal.
And I think that it's important to recognize that you can't necessarily just look at someone and think, oh, this person has experienced trauma. That a person may have experienced trauma even as a young child and may not have fully healed from that. And so in a trauma responsive environment, when we're really talking about how to treat people in Chicago, building upon healthy relationships, you want to always think if it's good for someone that's been impacted by trauma, it's really going to be good for any person that's engaging in the Chicago community. And so being trauma responsive and developing safe healing relationships with adults is really just good. It's a good thing to do.
We want to be thinking, if anyone walks into my space, whether that be my place of work or my home or my neighborhood, that they see the adults and the other people around them as being able to provide safety and security and predictability. And when we do that for people, we're able to engage them in problem solving and work through whatever it is the need that they came to get met. We think of it almost as the invisible backpack, that we don't know when someone walks into our space what kind of views they have about themselves, the world, and whether you are going to be helpful to them. And if we can be more proactive and create that kind of space that says, I'm here to help you regardless of what you've been through, that can be really powerful.
I can prove my community wrong. Like, people say I won't make it until I graduate, but I want to prove everybody that they're wrong.
Uplifting the youth, because that's mainly where it starts with, getting their perspective and their views of different things. And the millennials and a lot of the older generations are kind of put off and not really in sync with each other. And I think collaboration and communication amongst the two would definitely help.
So when students impacted by trauma, and furthermore, when human beings impacted by trauma, because we know that adults are impacted at similar rates by traumatic experiences, including those they experience in childhood, at similar rates as the students in our building, the young people in our building, we see a number of visible behaviors, right? That might mean isolation in a classroom, it might mean some flight behaviors, it might mean some frictional behaviors. More importantly for me in the work that we're doing here, there are invisible signs of trauma, right? And sometimes we don't notice the traumatic experiences that we have experienced firsthand or that live within us that are passed on via our ancestors. And so trauma can be visible and invisible. I think what's really important is that we create the caring, compassionate context for students to make their experiences, traumatic or resilient or asset-based, visible through caring, compassionate, dialogic exchanges with caring adults and caring counterparts.
We live and work in a city with a lot of adverse experiences. When our workplace and the care we provide is informed by the basic knowledge of the impact of trauma and stress, many things are likely to turn out better for the workforce and for those seeking support. Remember, hurt people. Therefore, healed people can heal people.
I think what can be done is to promote a culture of healing from within. I think it's important to establish those understandings and sort of guidance with officials that sort of represent the city and sort of guide other folks, residents, community members to the right path. Self-care is something that is very important in our daily lives. We work a lot and sometimes we don't focus on our mental health. And self-care is sort of taking that moment and understanding where we are. And it plays a big role in what we do. I think sometimes we don't understand how important it is to focus on ourselves before we focus on other people. That can definitely dramatically change the work that we do, and I think it does play a big role.
Witnessing or direct exposure to negative experiences every day and in working environments may contribute to our trauma and stress. For some, given the work that you do, you may have taken on the trauma and stress of those you serve and your colleagues. This is known as secondary or vicarious trauma. Over time, if these experiences are not addressed and healed, they can take a cumulative toll on your health and well-being. Let's look at 3 ways to help us incorporate self-care in our everyday work. Awareness, balance, and connection includes the intentional action to take care of our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. The goal is to alleviate or prevent the symptoms of vicarious and secondary trauma. Good self-care is challenging and can be especially challenging for those who are involved in daily work with individuals experiencing high levels of stress and trauma. Awareness requires mindful attention to all aspects of our experience, including thoughts, feelings, and things that happen in our physical environment. This kind of attention requires quiet time and space that supports self-reflection, self-regulation, and coping. It is equally important to maintain balance and diversity of activities at work and in our home environments. Balance your energies between work and play, between activity and rest, between focus and self, and focus on others. Balance provides stability and helps us to be more grounded when stress levels are high. Connection provides an anchor that supports us to be able to witness the tremendous suffering of others while not getting caught up in it. We cannot do this work alone, therefore we cannot heal alone.
We build our workforce through professional development and through mindfulness activities that they can take part in. We check in on them repeatedly through the summer. We also believe in showering them with chocolate at the end of the summer, and we have a big back-to-school celebration for our staff to celebrate all the important work they do for Chicago's kids all summer long.
So what can we do now? The universal approaches to being trauma-informed are considered best practices for how we do our work. These practices have the potential to improve engagement, overall wellness, and prevent re-traumatization. Safe environment. A safe environment which resists re-traumatization by creating predictable routines help individuals feel safe. We feel safe and secure when we know what is expected and what may happen. A safe environment is also about predictability. If we know who's in the space, we know who's around us, we're more likely to engage, we're also comfortable within the space, and we're likely to be more supportive to one another. Supportive relationships. The second S relates to providing supportive relationships that promote collaboration. An example of this practice is utilizing active listening skills and identifying an individual's strengths. We don't want to just hear what people are saying, we actually want to listen to what people are saying. The goal of being supportive is not to be a solution-oriented person or to be a rescuer, but to actually help someone identify what it is that they need and be able to provide that resource to them. It's important to know that you won't always have the answers to what someone needs, but the first step is making sure that you are supportive and that you are hearing what the person is saying. Self-regulation and coping skills. The next S is about self-soothing and self-regulation strategies. Once a person understands how to self-regulate and cope, we are more likely to face challenges differently. Self-regulation and coping employs a variety of skills and resources. This may include art, peace circles, engaging with supportive adults, opportunities to play, and mindfulness practices. Strengths and resilience. As stated earlier, all persons possess strengths as survivors and have demonstrated courage with resiliency.
I started off just getting bullied, and I was in the hospital for it. So I said, wait a minute, I'm going to take up the martial arts. When I started here, it gave me encouragement to teach these young children a little bit of discipline and self-control. They see what I do and they see that I'm educated, and it encourages them, and I give them a pat on the back every day and tell them, you're doing very well, and I think that really helps, encouragement.
Communicating by using positive language and using a strength-based approach helps develop capabilities and resilience in individuals. It doesn't focus on what one cannot do, but focuses on what one can do. Self and collective care. Our last S encourages us to practice and use self-care. Utilizing self-care helps bring forth your best self.
Focus on physical health, which is important, but a part of that is mental health. So I think it's important to have a big push for that and to really show that this is just as important as physical health is, and that we need the same types of resources to contribute to your mental health as you do your physical health. The flu is terrible, but we also have ways to treat it. Just like depression is something that people don't want to have, they don't choose to have it, but it kind of happens, so we should have support systems for that.
Our call to action is clear. Chicago needs organizations that relieve the burden and psychological distress of trauma and have the tools and resources to respond effectively and efficiently. It takes everyone to create and sustain the change we seek. Now, let's get started.
We know your time is valuable and limited, so thank you for listening and committing to the trauma-informed change. We would like to take a moment to thank our co-developers and a special thank you to our contributors.